The words, calm yet firm, cut through the sterile, air-conditioned hum of the Innovation and Ideation Hub at Aethelred Pharmaceuticals. They were spoken by a man in a standard-issue blue janitor's uniform, his hands resting on the handle of a mop bucket. He was addressing Lillian Croft, the head of global marketing, a woman carved from sharp suits, a steely gaze, and opinions as polished and unyielding as the marble floors. Lillian had been in her element, mid-pitch, her laser pointer dancing across a sleek, multi-million-dollar advertising campaign for the new asthma drug, aerosol. She froze, her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching into a parabola of pure, undiluted incredulity. Every executive in the plush, glass-walled room, a curated collection of MBAs and power ties, swiveled in their ergonomic chairs. A few stifled nervous laughs. Others studied the grain of the mahogany conference table with sudden, intense interest. A junior associate, Mark, discreetly slid his phone from his pocket, his thumb a nervous spasm over the record button. The air wasn't just tense, it was thick with the unspoken hierarchy of the place, a hierarchy that had just been publicly flouted. The man, Elijah, stood his ground. His voice hadn't been loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the room's expensive acoustics. He'd been quietly cleaning the glass whiteboard behind her, the one she'd just used to sketch out a demographic strategy she'd proudly, unironically labeled urban saturation. "You were saying," Lillian said, her voice now dripping with a condescension so thick you could almost taste it, "that I need to check my tone? Perhaps you should check your place. This is a private C-suite strategy meeting. The cleaning crew," she emphasized the word, twisting it into something small and insignificant, "is scheduled for after hours. There's a roster." Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't avert his eyes. Instead, he gestured with a calloused hand toward the whiteboard, where the words urban saturation were still written in Lillian's aggressive script. "Your plan? You're targeting zip codes 60617, 10456, 48234, areas with high-density populations of color for aerosol. That's called sophisticated market research," Lillian snapped, a brittle smile on her lips. "We go where the epidemiology leads us. Asthma rates are disproportionately higher in those communities. It's a fact." "Are they?" Elijah asked, his voice dropping even lower, becoming a focused beam of sound that cut through her bluster like a laser. "Or is the particulate matter from the Aethelred-owned Fuller Point chemical plant, which has been violating EPA standards for a decade, higher in those communities? You're manufacturing the problem in your Southside factories and then selling the overpriced cure from your Northside labs, and you're marketing it with images of black and brown kids joyfully resilient in smog-filled parks. That's not a campaign, Miss Croft. That's a predator circling its prey, then selling the antivenom." The air was officially gone from the room. It felt vacuum-sealed. Mark's phone was now openly recording, its tiny red light a beacon of impending doom. The CEO, Robert Aethelred, a man in his 60s with a face like a weathered ledger, who had so far been a silent observer, leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his fingers steepled. He wasn't angry. He was fascinated. Lillian's face flushed a blotchy, unbecoming red. "How dare you? You have no idea the complexities, the regulatory hurdles, the shareholder expectations of this business. You clean floors. You empty trash cans. Stick to what you know." The last sentence was a whip crack designed to humiliate and dismiss. Elijah placed his mop carefully, deliberately, into the bucket. The soft clunk was deafening in the silence. "I know that for 30 years I worked as a shift supervisor in the very Fuller Point plant you just acquired. I know the HEPA filters for the ventilation ducts were always on back order or not in this quarter's budget. I filed 17 formal complaints. I know the smell of the air on my son, Jamal's, clothes when he came home from school. I know the sound of his wheezing at night, a sound that became the soundtrack to my life." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I know he died of a catastrophic asthma attack at 12 years old, and I know the ambulance took 22 minutes to get to our house because the 911 dispatch system, which your company and your lobbyist successfully fought against funding, was stretched to its breaking point that night." He looked past Lillian, his gaze locking directly with Robert Aethelred's. "You're not selling a solution, Mr. Aethelred. You're monetizing a symptom you actively helped create. And your tone, Miss Croft, isn't just offensive. It's genocidal. It speaks of a calculated disregard for human life that you dress up in PowerPoints and focus groups." Lillian scoffed, a hollow, desperate sound. "This is absurd. This is a fairy tale. Robert, are we seriously going to let a disgruntled janitor derail a 9-month, multi-departmental $40 million market entry strategy based on some anecdotal sob story?" She spat the words, trying to reclaim the narrative with the only tools she knew: budget and authority. Robert Aethelred didn't look at her. His eyes remained fixed on Elijah, as if seeing him for the first time. "The lobbying, the dispatch system funding, that's not in the public-facing annual reports. How do you know about our position on that?" "Because I read the SEC filings you bury in 100 pages of legalese," Elijah said, his voice flat. "I listen to the quarterly earnings calls on my breaks, through a single earbud while I'm bluffing these very floors. I've read every environmental impact report this company has ever filed, and the ones it tried to suppress. I know this company's balance sheet, its liabilities, its moral debts, better than most of the VPs in this room. Cleaning gives you a lot of time to think, and it gives you unparalleled access to listen." Mark's video, hastily titled "Janitor Destroys Big Pharma Exec on Ethics," was already being uploaded. The digital wave was beginning to form, a tsunami of outrage that would soon crash over Aethelred's carefully constructed public image. #Aethelred Greed, Creating the Cure, Elijah Vance would start trending within the hour. But in that moment, in that hermetically sealed room, the only thing that mattered was the seismic shock of truth. Elijah didn't shout. He didn't need to. His quiet, relentless certainty was a wrecking ball swinging into the fragile glass house of their corporate delusion. He reached into the deep pocket of his janitorial trousers and pulled out a worn brown leather wallet, its edges softened by time. From behind a faded photo of a smiling boy with a gap-toothed grin, he extracted a dog-eared plastic ID badge. It was old, the designer relic from 2 decades ago, the laminate peeling at the corners. But the name and title were starkly, undeniably clear. Dr. Elijah Vance, Ph.D., Environmental Toxicology, Head of Long-Term Ecological Impact Studies. The gasp that rippled through the room was a collective, physical thing. Lillian stared at the badge as if it were a venomous snake. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Finally, she managed a strangled, That's a forgery. You're a janitor." "I was laid off from R&D during the strategic realignment and cost-cutting purge of 2008, Elijah said, his voice heavy with the history no one in the room had bothered to learn. The one that axed the entire long-term safety and sustainability division. My pension wasn't enough. A man has to work, has to provide. Cleaning the offices of the people who discarded my research, who called it non-essential, it gives you a unique perspective. You see the disconnect between the memos about corporate responsibility and the decisions made in rooms like this one." Robert Aethelred stood up slowly, the legs of his chair scraping against the floor. The sound was like a gunshot. "Elijah Vance," he murmured, the name a ghost from a corporate past he'd chosen to forget. "I remember your name now. Your preliminary reports on the long-term particulate matter from Fuller Point. We were told they were alarmist, that the models were flawed." "You were told they were expensive to act upon," Elijah corrected him, his voice soft but unyielding. "There's a difference." The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been utterly annihilated. The man with the mop and the bucket, the man that they had walked past for years without a second glance, held the moral, intellectual, and now the strategic high ground. Lillian Croft looked like a marionette with its strings cut, her confidence replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension of her own obsolescence. Her entire campaign, her entire worldview, was built on a foundation of willful ignorance, and Elijah had just kicked it out from under her. The video, as predicted, went super viral. It wasn't just a clip, it was a cultural moment. News outlets, from CNN to independent online journals, picked it up. The janitor who knew too much. Big Pharma's conscience came with a mop. Shareholders panicked, their emails flooding the board. A congressional hearing was announced focusing on pharmaceutical lobbying and environmental justice. But inside the gleaming headquarters of Aethelred Pharmaceuticals, the real, tangible change began. Robert Aethelred, in a move that stunned the industry, didn't fire Elijah. He reinstated him. Not as a janitor, but as the senior vice president and head of a newly formed Ethical Innovation and Environmental Accountability Task Force, with a direct, unfiltered report to the board of directors and a budget to match its monumental mandate. Lillian Croft was placed on immediate, unpaid administrative leave. A subsequent internal audit initiated by Elijah's new team revealed she had knowingly suppressed negative environmental impact data and had manipulated focus group findings to push the aerosol campaign. She parted ways with the company a month later, her reputation in tatters, a cautionary tale in a dozen business school case studies. Elijah's first act in his new role was to scrap the aerosol campaign entirely. He didn't just shelve it, he held a press conference explaining exactly why it was unethical, laying bare the strategy Lillian had championed. He then reallocated its entire $40 million budget to a genuine, groundbreaking initiative called the Community Breath Project. It partnered with the city to fund urban green spaces, upgrade emission control systems at their old plants, and create a massive community health fund for the very neighborhoods they had previously targeted for profit. He hired from those communities, bringing in public health experts and community organizers. He never raised his voice. He never traded his simple trousers for a suit. He showed up to board meetings in clean, modest clothes, his presence a constant, quiet, and powerful reminder of the profound cost of corporate arrogance and the transformative, disruptive power of truth. The janitor who cleaned their floors had, in the end, cleaned the entire house. The story wasn't merely about an undercover genius. It was a damning portrait of a system so myopically obsessed with profit, perception, and power that it had become blind to the humanity it employed and the damage it caused. It was about the wisdom we conveniently discard and the voices we systematically silence, and the stunning, world-altering reckoning that occurs when they finally, calmly decide to speak their truth to power.